In this video, we're going to discuss some of the observed differences between Balanced and Tactician difficulty in Baldur's Gate 3, as well as a couple of experiments to determine if there are any changes to the game's mechanics under the hood. I created this video so that all of us are informed with the alterations, just in case we decided to give it a shot. We'll start off with the most obvious change, in which all enemies have higher health points, 30% more to be exact. For example, Gimlock, who's the leader of Tomb Raiders found outside Jericho's temple, his HP have risen from 20 to 26, while his other stats in the character sheet remain unaltered. The same pattern is also evident with his cohorts, and the only other thing that's different is with their wizard, Kelana. She likes to use the sleep spell in both difficulty settings, and in Tactician, she'll also utilize Ice Knife. These qualities are also present with the Entombed Scribes, in which their higher HP are enhanced by one of them being able to cast Fog Cloud in addition to Silence. If we take a look at their stats, we can see that they also gained a notable feature, Attack of Opportunity in this case. But the most surprising of all is the enhancement that their warrior has received, whose strength score has risen from 10 to 16. So there is some truth to the notion that enemies seem to hit harder, but only if the ability score reflects it, and not as a general rule. Regardless, I did run a couple of damage tests to check if there are any differences that's not seen in the character sheet. First is from the Cambion at the Nautiloid as he hits the Mind Flayer with normal attacks. I checked to make sure that his ability score is the same in both settings and gathered 30 samples each. In Balanced difficulty, his average damage is 13 rounded down, while on Tactician it's at 14. A complementary test was taken from this level 4 Null as it hits our Paladin. From the same number of samples, the average damage in both difficulty settings is 4 rounded down. The results indicate that there's very little difference to perceive a noticeable change. So to recap the improvements with regards to enemy creatures, all of them have 30% more HP, and the rest varies depending on the character themselves. They might gain a new notable feature, like Fury of the Small, which most goblins will encounter possess. Some of them might also get a new combat action, like the Synaptic Discharge done by Intellect Devourers, or maybe an enhanced ability score, like +3 to Wisdom granted to this Red Cap Blood Sage, that would make its magic hurt a bit more. I also took the time to see if there are any changes to their attack behaviors by running some tests across 2 combat scenarios. The first one is with the cave spiders underneath the Blighted Village, and as far as I can tell, there are no differences in how they engage foes. They don't focus on any specific member of our party, which rules out the possibility of them attacking the one with the least amount of HP and/or armor class first. I even set Lae'zel to be 1 level lower than the rest of the party, and they didn't take advantage of that. The same result happened against these level 4 gnolls.
Can't even catch my breath.
When it comes to visible skill checks, their difficulty class stay the same regardless of the game setting. As we try to recruit Lump the Enlightened and his gang, we'll have to surpass a DC 20. The same thing happens when we try to talk our way past Ogre Palma, that requires a DC 22 in both Balanced and Tactician. But what about the hidden skill checks? It's safe to assume that they play by the same rules as the visible ones, but for the sake of consistency, I also ran a couple of tests. The objective here is to determine if there are any significant change to their success rate when we switch the difficulty setting. For these experiments, I temporarily set 3 of my characters' related skills to 0, and made sure that the karmic dice is off, so nothing else would influence the result other than their innate difficulty class and the dice rolls itself. First off is the hidden bag found within the haystack inside the Druid's Grove. From a sample size of 30, the success rate in Balanced is at 60%, and it climbed to 70% in Tactician, 3 units higher than the other. This outcome is repeated when we move on to the Spider's Nest, which had a success rate of 60% in Balanced, which slightly rises to 66% in Tactician, or 2 units higher. The results in these two tests are contrary to what we expect, but it's also a sample variation of only 2 to 3 units, so it's most likely the dice roll doing its magic than any other influencing factor. In the third test, I chose the hidden treasure found north of the Blighted Village, and the success rates for both difficulty settings are at 33%, which tells us that its DC must be relatively high, and is also at the same value regardless. Apart from improvements in the characteristics of foes, another big change that severely impacts our experience are the prices of items. In Tactician mode, the value of everything for sale rises by around 20%. So for example, the Gloves of Missile Snaring climbs from 400 to 480 gold, while the Spell Thief Longbow is inflated from 250 to 300. Now, we might think that this isn't such a big deal until we realize that the value of items we sell are also affected by around 16%. So if we try to peddle Nature's Snare Quarterstaff, for example, the price drops from 160 down to 133. The Haste Helm, meanwhile, from 96 gold will be decreased down to 80. We can of course try to offset its effects by letting our high charisma adventurer handle the exchange, but even the bonus from doing so is mitigated in Tactician difficulty. In our example here, the Paladin has a charisma score of 16, and as you'll see, his bargaining capabilities are reduced. This +2 hide armor in balanced difficulty is regularly priced at 775, and he was able to bring it down to 620, a 20% discount. In Tactician, the value of the same item rises to 930, and he was only able to cut the price down to 775, a 16% reduction rounded down. When trying to sell the Speedy Light Feet boots in Balanced, the item's value rises from 96 to 120, getting 25% more for it. In Tactician, the value drops down to 80 and is compensated by the Charisma ability, which sets the value to 96, but it's only a 20% increase. Apart from gear, potions, and alchemy ingredients, camp supplies will also most likely be an additional expense, because the requirements for each long rest are doubled. So it's either we pay close attention to the items we buy and sell while playing at the hardest difficulty, or just pilfer the stuff we need. Thankfully, their difficulty class stay the same regardless of the setting we choose. So those are the observations about Tactician difficulty that I gathered. As a final note, you're probably already aware that using the Friend's Cantrip is potentially dangerous in that setting. But an easy way to avoid trouble is to just create some distance immediately after the conversation. Even if the creature realizes that somebody placed the spell on them, as long as our entire party is away, they'll have no one to blame. I ran this test multiple times and it should work for you as well. Thank you for watching.